3.2 Behaviorism is outdated. You may be thinking, of course I use the behaviorist method. It works, doesn't it? Many people believe that the behaviorist method is the best way, the only way to get their employees, students, and children to do what they expect them to. On an intellectual level, it makes sense that an employee who is compliant with the company culture and completes assignments on time deserves a raise, promotion, or better office space. It also makes sense that an employee who fails to do so may be passed up for a promotion, moved to another department, or even fired. Similarly, a child might be rewarded with an allowance or a snack if they finish their chores. If they fail to do so, they will not receive their reward and might even be grounded or have a toy taken away. We'll agree that the behaviorist method does work in some situations. For example, a child won't touch a hot stove more than once. We learn quickly from pain. We bet you can see yourself in this scenario. In preschool, depending on the teacher and the classroom environment, you were somewhat free to experiment as you learned. No one was grading you on your Lego house or your finger paintings. What's more, you weren't wondering whether your Lego houses were good or bad. Instead, you were simply delighted by the act of creating something out of nothing. You were more or less able to learn how to interact with other children and the world around you on your own terms, in your own way. Once you entered kindergarten, however, things changed. You received your first grades, cleverly disguised as star stickers or smiley faces. At this young age, the education system already stratified you as a 3-star, a 2-star, 1-star, or no-star student. You could barely tie your shoes, yet you could already separate the smart kids from the dumb kids. You then grew into grade school, aptly named for the time in your life that arbitrary letters, A through F, dictated your self-worth. At 6 years old, you could clearly see some of your classmates advancing more quickly than others. As you moved through the grades, this structure became more and more apparent. By high school, some children and young adults received college credit, while others struggled in remedial classes. If you graduated from high school, you decided whether to continue your education or join the workforce. Your high school GPA greatly influenced that decision. Whatever route you chose, this system further stratified you. If you went on to college, you continued as an A through F student, with your average letter grade determining whether you could advance to postgraduate education, and subsequently determining how much money you would make as an adult. If you pursued employment, that A turned into a raise, a better office space, or prestige among your colleagues. That F transformed into poor work reports or downward movements in the company. What happened to the brain with limitless potential? Had it not been present in first grade and all the way up through the university? Why did stratification and labeling prevent some students from achieving their true potential? Do you know people who fell by the wayside in this perverse academic and stratified journey? When it gets personal, we see traction. When it is my child or my sister or brother who is struggling in a reward-punishment system, then we are willing to look deeper into the situation and suggest solutions that make sense from a neurobiological standpoint. In his book, The Orchid and the Dandelion, Dr. Boyce describes a devastating situation that occurred in his middle-class family where his sister, whose autonomic nervous system indicated her sensitivity to labeling and stratification in social context, caused her life outcomes to be diametrically opposite to his own life trajectory.
Boyce uses the terms orchid and dandelion to describe two different types of learners. Dandelions, despite being raised in a behaviorist model, persevere and thrive anyway, kind of like the ubiquitous yellow weed. Orchids, like the temperamental yet beautiful plant, need the exact right conditions in order to thrive. Think greenhouse.
We all know people like this in our families, workplaces, and schools. Such orchid souls fare poorly in a reward-punishment system that pushes people out rather than inviting them in. Incidentally, the remainder of people whose sensitivity in their autonomic nervous system, the part controlling subconscious bodily functions, is more closely associated with resilience and grit, don't do any better in a structure that allows them to slide by with the barest minimum, as they easily learn to game the system. The K-12 system is a prime example of a reward-punishment model that does not work. Every year in the United States, over 1.2 million students drop out of high school. That's one student every 26 seconds, or 7,000 students a day. Furthermore, the U.S., which historically had some of the highest graduation rates of any developed country, now lags behind. In 2017, Finland had a high school graduation rate of 99%, and Japan had a rate of 98%. At the same time, America fell far below New Zealand, South Korea, the Netherlands, Canada, China, and Germany, with a rate of 83%. In addition, 32 million adults in the United States can't read, according to the U.S. Department of Education and the National Institute of Literacy. Clearly, children in the behaviorist system find it difficult to reach their potential. Learning scientists often witness this firsthand. The following account is of a school visit from a scholar who helps teachers shift from behaviorist methods to neurocognitive methods.
As a learning scientist, I spend a lot of time in schools across the U.S. I offer support to teachers and staff who are working to include a more neuro-informed method. When I arrive, I am usually asked to wait in the main office or a corridor. Here, it is impossible not to observe punitive behaviorist remedies applied to children by people who believe they are acting in their best interest. One day, while seated in the main office to await my meeting with the principal, a young girl walked through the door. She was a little overweight and looked to be about 10 years old. I watched her shuffle over to the front desk, head down, and obviously uncomfortable. "I'm finished," she announced sheepishly as she placed a math worksheet on the front desk. "Good girl," an office worker responded. The worker then reached over to a glass jar filled with M&Ms. She opened the jar, pulled out a single piece of candy, and placed it in the child's chubby palm. "You can go back to your class now." Without so much as a grin or even the slightest bit of eye contact, the girl sidled out of the room, popped the M&M into her mouth, and returned to her classroom. Apparently, she had been taken out of class because she was unable to complete her math assignment. She was then isolated and placed in a room by herself until she completed a worksheet that presumably she didn't understand in the first place. When she finished, she was instructed to go to the office for her reward. They praised her in the same way you'd praise a puppy. Good girl.
This child learned a lot from that experience. Her RAS, amygdala, and hippocampus were busy processing new information or consolidating old beliefs that would remain with her for life. She learned that she wasn't as smart as the other kids. She learned that if she didn't understand something, she shouldn't ask questions. Otherwise, she'd be embarrassed and isolated. She learned not to trust teachers and adults. She learned that school is a place she didn't like and a place that didn't like her back. She learned that food was a reward and stratification was a punishment, and that teachers, office workers, and principals were the enemy. What she didn't learn, unfortunately, was math. She didn't learn that her brain is plastic and that knowledge is grown, not inherited. She didn't learn that she has the same potential as every other student, and she didn't leave that office convinced her brain is every bit as brilliant as everyone else's. She didn't learn that she has the capacity to achieve whatever she puts her mind to. She learned that she is limited, not limitless. Sadly, her experience is common. In fact, my son, Jesse, had a similar experience in school. Despite his potential, Jesse wasn't as excited about learning in school as when he learned things on his own. The final straw for me was when I was called into a parent-teacher conference and the teacher asked, "Now, which one is Jesse?" This educator didn't even know who my son was, yet had the audacity to claim he was the problem. I pulled him and my daughter out of school right afterward, and we began homeschooling. We would read up about it, work on it, try it out on the farm, look it up on YouTube. Both kids excelled with this educational approach as they segued to additional schooling, college, and work life. At 19, Jesse now makes an amazing living. He recently bought a 5-acre farm, has a new car, keeps a flexible budget, understands collaboration and co-creation in the workspace, and is on the fast track. He is a critical thinker who now teaches others his trade and is enjoying life to its fullest. This behaviorist system delivers rewards that do not work and punishments that build defense mechanisms that keep children at the plateau of below average ability. When these students enter the workforce, they carry the problems of the K-12 system with them. Trends, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, show that more jobs now require post-secondary education, and that trend is predicted to increase. Yet schools remain in a system where they fail to produce confident, well-rounded critical thinkers. It's no wonder so many corporate leaders decree the prospect of hiring new graduates, because they are so unsuited for the workplace. Furthermore, businesses often operate in the same reward-punishment schema that schools do, and subsequently produce stress, anxiety, and fear that manifests in unhealthy habits, so employees fail to reach their potential. Aside from the devastating moral, ethical, and social costs of traditional teaching methods, behaviorism is also responsible for huge corporate monetary losses. Researchers attribute those losses to poor employee engagement, low workplace satisfaction, attrition, and silly errors. Ask any human resource director the expense of attrition, which includes the cost of training and then losing that employee, as well as hiring another who then enters the same costly cycle. It's a devastating bottom-line dilemma.